My name's Lloyd Begley. I'm the museum curator. Come on in.
Hello, welcome. My name is Gordon Barnhart, and I am the Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan. I'm sitting behind an early 20th century mahogany desk in the study at Government House in Regina. Saskatchewan has always been a place of big dreams and larger-than-life characters. These remarkable people have played out those dreams on a vast prairie canvas. Today, I invite you to enjoy a new television series with the unique name, Yes, Gargoyles Do Live in Saskatchewan. The Architectural Heritage Society of Saskatchewan is the sponsor of this exciting series. Each year, I collaborate with the Society to present awards of excellence in architectural heritage. This series furthers the goals of the awards to stimulate interest in our history, to preserve meaningful places, and to educate our citizens. This series will take you to Saskatchewan cities, towns, villages, and the surrounding countryside. You will meet Saskatchewan people and hear their stories about the history, folklore, and built heritage of our beautiful province. I have always taken great interest in Saskatchewan's heritage, including this magnificent vice-regal house and our impressive legislative building. Join me today to discover the rich history of our province. You will experience a fascinating tapestry of stories woven together by Saskatchewan's people. I invite you to sit back, watch, and enjoy. And you know what? Gargoyles do live in Saskatchewan.
Welcome to this episode of Yes, Gargoyles Do Live in Saskatchewan. It's the show that tells you all about what's happening in the world of architectural heritage. In this episode, you'll hear how an inner-city heritage school is fighting for its life. And then we'll show you how we really do live with Roman temples today. And finally, we'll tell you a story of a real tycoon and his legacy in Saskatoon.
Hi, my name's Lenore Swiston, and I'm the president of the Saskatoon Heritage Society. And I have a story to tell you about a community called Pleasant Hill. And Pleasant Hill resides in Saskatoon. It's one of the core communities, one of the founding communities, and was really seen at the time of its founding, late 1800s, early 1900s, as kind of the hotbed of place where the immigrants lived. So you had your Ukrainians, your Russians, your Polish, your Germans, First Nation, your Métis were all in this area, and it was a very divergent, vibrant area in its making. It has some really key anchors in it, and some of those key anchors include St. Paul's Catholic Hospital, founded by the Grey Nuns, and that's one of the anchors of it. It also has a number of cathedrals. It has the Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral here, St. George's, and then it also has the other Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral that's just back in behind the houses here. It has a number of residential components, multi-use components and such. But again, what I want to say is this is a very vibrant area. Over the years, it's gone through its ebbs and flows, its circles, its cycles. And one of those cycles was it did come to start to see some erosion. And in fact, if we take our camera and kind of take a look over this way, you're going to see that there's some houses here that are on pylons right now. They're actually slated for removal. The reason why they're slated for removal is because this area was ignored for a time municipally, it started to erode, things started to degrade. Houses started to not be looked after as much, and then the city went, whoa, wait a minute, we've got to do something about this. So they started to really bring back some community planning, and they started something called the Local Area Planning Program. In the late 1990s, early 2000, is a way of saying we need to bring the Pleasant back in Pleasant Hill. So the community itself, the residents, along with a number of different stakeholders, facilitated by the City of Saskatoon's planning branch, went ahead and started to look at how can we bring this back to a place of where it can really be that teeming environment again. So they identified a number of things that were important to them. They identified the hospital. We need to keep that hospital. They identified the cultural groups. That history, that heritage is really key. So the churches were important to keep. And they identified, and something we're going to focus on today, a school by the name of St. Mary Catholic School. If we look right through this fence here and into those bushes, and we're going to take a walk down there, there was a developer who had assembled all of the houses that used to exist here, and they were really in rough condition. And he assembled it, and then he pitched out to the city of Saskatoon, and he said, I wonder if there's something that we could do to utilize this area and bring about a redevelopment potential for the site. So what happened was the city of Saskatoon, through the local area planning process, identified any opportunity for revitalization we want to be a part of. But let's keep the emphasis here. We're talking about heritage. So the emphasis was, but there's this school, and it's called St. Mary's Catholic School, a community school, a core school in a core neighborhood that is known to be homage to a number of different cultural groups here. Large population of Aboriginal population, and a really great curriculum, great teachers that are telling the story along that lines. If you take a look through this fence, you can start to get a little bit of a stronger peek of it. This was the first purpose-built Saskatoon Catholic school. This is really key. 1913 it was built. It was built by none other than the first registered architect in Saskatchewan by the name of David Webster. And not only that, it's the first Catholic purpose-built school that is a castle school. So the community, through its... A castle school, which means, and that's a great question. What that means is that if you take a look at some of the peaks and some of the different architectural components, it's considered castle in its structure. So it has that stature through its brick and through its different architectural features. The most neat thing about this school is that it was seen as a real key anchor for the community, and is today considered a really key anchor. But there's also a couple of other important things to consider. Everybody knew that this school was outliving its ability to continue to be a school because of the growing needs in population and what the growing standards are in terms of building code and all that sort of stuff. So what was taken upon is the community said, you know what, if there ever comes an opportunity for the need for a new school, let's keep this building and use it for something else because it's solidly built. So the Catholic School Board knew this. And the Catholic School Board went ahead and in 2006 commissioned an architectural company by the name of Edwards and Edwards. And Edwards and Edwards, through their study, found out that yes, indeed, this structure is sound. You're not going to find a more sound structure than this. Yes, it's going to need all of its electrical upgraded. Yes, it's going to need its plumbing upgraded. But that's the case of a lot of schools that maybe don't have this kind of stature to it. So their first recommended thing was they do not see this as needing to be demolished, but they do see its potential for adaptive reuse. So one of the things that happened was, so in 2006, the study came back, the report came back, this school can be reused. The community had said through their local area planning process, this school lends itself well to adaptive reuse. Please don't demolish this. Next thing we know, as a heritage society, all of a sudden we see a map after the community has said reuse the school. After the study comes back and the engineers and the architects say this thing lends itself really well to adaptive reuse, we see a concept map through the city of Saskatoon that says in fact the opposite. It's a dotted line. The school's no longer there. Well, as Heritage Society members and as a few other people in the community that were just keen on seeing the benefits of having buildings like this being retained, started to question. And so we went to the city of Saskatoon and we said, why is it a dotted line? And they said, well, because we're not going to be reusing the building. And we said, well, wait a minute, how come that's the case? And they said, well, because we just don't think that we can use it because we've got a new school going to where the land we purchased that's vacant, to where all the buildings were moved out, and because of moving all those buildings out and putting a new school that's got a very big building envelope, like 3 times the size of this one, we need to make room for green space. And we went, wait a minute. But the community said we can make room for green space and we can make room for an adaptive reuse of this building because guess what? We live in a 4-weather climate, 4-season climate. It lends itself well to be utilizing as part of that community space. It could be used for mixed-use development, which means it could be used for housing. It could be used for business. It could be used for cultural purposes, all of that sort of stuff. In fact, developers themselves came forward to the city and said, you know what? We'd really like a crack at getting that building. We'll come to you with resources. We don't even need your resources. We'll come to you. And the city said, no, sorry, too late. No. The end of the story is, and the moral of the story is here, we're hoping that we can change the mindset, quite frankly, of community leadership to go, you know what, we're not going to be able to save every building, but let's at least give the opportunity to have the discussion, to put them on the table, to see if they can at least make it as part of the redevelopment of a community. Because you know what at the end of the day makes for really cool communities is unique, beautiful buildings that can anchor your community, just like St. Mary's School.
Hello, my name is Terry Sinclair. I've been interested in classical history and architecture for many years, and I find that the city of Regina and indeed all of Saskatchewan have got examples of architecture that goes back 2,500 years to the era of Greece and Rome. The Legislature building is probably the best example of classical architecture in the province. Here you get a typical Roman temple front with columns, the triangular architectural item called a pediment, and in that pediment is monumental sculpture meant to illustrate aspects of Saskatchewan history. This is much the same as the Greeks and Romans did, going back to the era of the Parthenon in Athens and indeed the Pantheon, the temple of all the gods in Rome. This would be an example of the monumental doorways that the people going into the temples, into the government buildings, would actually be seeing in Rome. Now, this has been modified in recent architecture, where initially the French and then the English would change the building proportions somewhat, putting in blocks, corner blocks, that sort of thing. But it's basically the Roman method of building. It's impressive and meant to be impressive. As we enter, you can see the mosaic work on the floors, once again, typically Roman and Greek, and then the entrance stairway, which would carry you up into the temple, which would lead you into seeing the awe of the gods of the day. Rome contributed two major things to architecture. One was the perfection of the arch. Almost every Roman building, the Roman monuments, the houses, and indeed right to the bridges and aqueducts are a series of arches. Then the other contribution that they made was the invention of concrete. Many of the Roman buildings that still stand today are made of concrete. And you'll see architecture like this throughout the Roman Empire, but mainly you can see this in the Temple of All the Gods in Rome, built soon after 100 AD, where they incorporated many elements of columns, mosaic floors, and domes. Now, the Pantheon is nothing if not a huge dome with a porch attached. If you look into the Pantheon, you'll see much of the same architectural detailing. If you look in the legislature building, and up into the dome, you'll see some square architectural elements called corbelling. This was designed by the Romans in an effort to be able to build the dome and allow for the maximum height of the dome. The Pantheon is built in 3 layers. One was a heavy concrete, the second was a lighter concrete, and the third, mainly the dome, was a very light concrete which would be reinforced by the ribs, which become a part of the corbelling. Really, if you look at the pillars too, these are ionic. Essentially, they look like a couple of scrolls that have been pushed up into the ceiling. The other detailing of this building is typical Roman also, where you have columns holding up small architectural details, where you have the items of interest in the ceiling and the rails that are part of the overseeing areas of the second story of this building. You take a look at the dome, as I said, one of the major contributions to architecture in Western society. A dome is really nothing if not a series of arches. You have an arch at 90 degrees, and you carry on all around, and you wind up with a dome. In the center of the rotunda, where we're standing in the Legislative building, you'll notice a structure that resembles a well. This is copied from the tomb of Napoleon in Les Invalides in Paris. It seems ironic that most of the Legislative building have got classical elements that come from the Roman Empire, but one of the main things in the center of its rotunda, the heart of the building, is from the Emperor Napoleon's time when he was trying to duplicate the empire of the Romans, only based in Paris. The Romans always wanted to build monuments to their military heroes, and indeed included many people on columns within friezes or low sculptures within their buildings detailing their military triumphs and the deeds of their soldiers. Here in the Legislative building in Saskatchewan, we too are commemorating our fallen warriors from both world wars within the building. The architectural detailing of this building is amazing. You can envision yourself within almost any Roman public building once you're in the Legislative building of Saskatchewan.
I'm Lenore Swiston. I'm the president of the Saskatoon Heritage Society, and along with me is
John Parry, who's the vice president of the Saskatoon Heritage Society.
Excellent. So we're here to tell you a little bit about the history of the Drinkle building. And the Drinkle building is one of the anchors for the city of Saskatoon. It has a number of notable figures that are connected to the history of Saskatoon along its side. John, you want to tell us a little bit about him?
Certainly. Well, of course, there's J.C. Drinkle himself, who really, having given his name to this building, has pride of place amongst the founding fathers, if we might call them that, of the city of Saskatoon. There are also other notables like J.C. Klinkskill, Jimmy Flanagan, who built what was originally the Flanagan's Hotel, now known as the Senator. And then there's Willoughby, Wilson, and Cairns, other pioneers from those early years of the last century when Saskatoon blossomed into the core of what Saskatoon is today. As we're outside the entrance to Regent Plaza, as it's been known since 1976, the architectural features that were originally designed for this building were even more elegant and ornate than what we have today. And I feel that with the reduction in some of the ornamentation, the style of the building is very much a modern style of 100 years ago. So you have the plaque here, Regent Plaza. And in fact, this is Drinkle number 3 building, as you will have noticed from the shots. And Drinkle number 1 and number 2 are no longer with us. But the Drinkle number 3 building serves obviously as a monument to Drinkle, who built it, and also to the diversity and change that's inherent